Graphing a semicircle, we're going to sketch the graph of a function and then state the domain and range. Alright, let's take a look at, and we know that a semicircle, looks like this or something like that, so they already kind of give us an idea of what we're going to be sketching, but let's just make sure that we understand how to do it if we didn't get any clue ahead of time. I'm going to look at what values are going to be able to be used for x in this function. By the way, you notice that this right here is outside of the radical. That means that every value that I have for the y output is going to be negative. No matter what, I'm going to have a negative y. So I can already get some idea, I have an idea of what the range is going to be like, right? Because I can tell that I can only have negatives. Now, we're going to be able to use a 0, but let's go ahead and take a look at what we can use for the x. If I put in, on this problem, if I put in a 10, if I put in a, I don't know, a 4. Let's just put in a 4 and see what happens. I'm looking to see if I can put in something that would give me, if I can put in a 4, it would give me a negative under the radical. In other words, 4 times 4 is 16. That would be 9 minus 16. And I'm going to be getting a negative 7. In other words, by putting in a 4 in for x, that's going to give me a negative under the radical. Well, obviously, that's not okay. If we're talking about domain, domain is always about the real values for x, not the imaginary. So, if I'm looking at what values are going to work, I know that 4 is going to be too large. What about 3? If I put a 3 in here, 9 minus 3 squared, that's 9 minus 9, and that's a 0. Is that going to be okay? Well, I can take the square root of 0. So putting in a 3 is going to be fine. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to see, well, what would happen if I put in a negative 3? Well, 3 seems like it's kind of the cutoff point, doesn't it, because of this 9? So let's see, can I go all the way to negative 3? Sure I can. Let's look at it. Negative 3 squared is 9. 9 minus 9 is 0. So it looks like that I'm going to be able to go from negative 3 all the way to positive 3. I couldn't go to 4. We already determined that, right? So it doesn't look like I'm going to do anything smaller than negative 3 or larger than 3. But let's take a look at the values inside of 3 and negative 3. What if I made this if I made x, oh gosh. What about a 0? What if I made x a 0? 0 squared. So that's going to give me a 9. Is that going to work? Yeah, 0 works. All right. Now this is the one situation where we're not going to have both. We're not going to have a negative answer. So we put in a 0, we get a 0. Let me move my negatives around a little bit here. I put in a 3. I'm going to get, if I put in a 0, I'm going to get myself a 3. If I put in a 3, we already determined that's going to actually give me a 0. If I put in a 3, that's going to give me a 0. All right. Okay. That's going to be, let me fix that one, that's going to be the negative 3. So, if I put in negative 3, I get a 0. There's no such thing as plus or minus 0, so we got that. If I put in a 3, no such thing as plus or minus 0, so I get that. If I put in a 0, I get the square root of 9, and the outside of that has a negative, so I'm going to have a negative 3. Now, the other choices that I have are really going to give me decimal answers, and so I could go ahead and pick, let's say, a negative 2 and a positive 2 and see what we're going to get. If I put in a negative 2, that's going to give me a 4. 9 minus 4 is going to be the square root of 5. And that's something close to, what, 2.2-ish. But we remember that there's a negative in front, right? So that's going to be negative 2.2-ish. Okay? If I put in a positive 2, it's not going to give me anything different. It's going to give me the same thing, right? Putting in a positive 2 gives me a 4 as well. So I'm just looking to see, hey, what's going to work in there? What's going to be too large or too small? So let's take a look at what this gives us. Let's go ahead and graph this. We have negative 3, 0. We have 3, 0. We have over 0, negative 3. We have over 2, negative 2.2 over 2, negative 2.2. Okay, and over negative 2, 2.2. We really do see that this is going to be a pretty nice semicircle. Right? There's my semicircle. So, let's just say we didn't have the picture. Let's try to do this domain and range business with just a table. I have negative 3, and I know I could put in some in-between numbers. I can go through to 0 and then come back out to the positive 3. But I can't do anything past that. So here's what I know. Negative 3 is okay to positive 3. Nothing past that in either direction, but anything in between those is fine. That's for my domain. On my range, looks like that I'm only going to have negatives, right? But what's the smallest negative I can produce? The smallest negative I can produce is a negative 3. That's it. The largest number I can produce is a 0. That's it. And if I look at my range, then that means I'm going to go from negative 3 to 0. That's all I get. Negative 3 to 0 for my range of values. Okie doke. Let's take a look at the next one. So let's see this one, what this one does with looking at what values would be okay. Now, if we notice, what is the difference between this right here and this one here? The only difference I see is that we don't have a negative in front. So I don't see that that's going to change any of my input values. So let's look and see what we were able to input. We were able to input negative 3. We even used a negative 2, even though it gave us a decimal. We put 0 in, a positive 2, and a 3. So I'm going to get the same value, basically the same value, but the opposite sign. Okay, so what I'm getting is the positive 2.2. I'm getting a positive 2.2, and I'm getting a 3. So it's clear that this is just a semicircle that's going to be going in the positive direction. And so over 2, 2.2, over 2, 2.2, and here's my semicircle here. Because all my y values are positive. That means it has to be that my graph is above, has to be above the x-axis because they're positive. So let's take a look at the domain and range. Domain, let's look at this right here. Domain is clearly negative 3 to 3 because we could have inserted other values in between here. So we're talking about continuous between there. Pardon me. And my range, let's look there. My range is 0 to 3. So if I look at my picture, it's obvious that that's correct. I can do it by looking at the table or the picture. All right, I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching.